Welcome back for another Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access In-Depth Class Guide. In today's video, I'll be focusing on the Druid class, specifically the Circle of the Moon. I'll go over everything from character creation, to the features that you gain as you level up, and of course I'll be focusing a lot on the Druid's Wildshape ability and the various forms and benefits that come along with it. I will cover the Land Druid in a future video, so be on the lookout for that. Quick shout out to Gore Spiller, Phil Sokoloff, M. Fantho, and Sakara Kit for your guys' support on the channel. I really appreciate you guys, as well as everyone else. Links to my Twitter and my Discord server will be below. Let's get right into it. Wisdom is the Druid's spellcasting ability, so in character creation, if you want to optimize your Druid, you're going to want to pick a race that offers a +1 to Wisdom. A higher Wisdom modifier will increase the overall power of many of your Druid's spells, making some of them more likely to hit their targets, less likely to be resisted, and also increasing the damage that some will be able to dish out. The races currently in early access that offer a +1 to Wisdom are the Wood Elf, Human, Half Elf, and the Gold Dwarf. All of these races will work well, but I will point out that the Gold Dwarf allows you to be a bit tankier, and the Wood Elf offers some nice extra weapon proficiencies such as bows, even though you're not going to really need weapons. Before you assign your ability score points, let me first point out that we're going to be playing the Circle of the Moon subclass, when presented with our subclass choice at level 2. This means we'll be using the Druid's Wildshape feature and transforming into various animals quite often. When you use Wildshape, your Druid will take on the Strength, Dexterity, and Constitution ability scores of the beasts that you Wildshape into. Your Druid's Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma, however, will remain the same, so if you dump Strength, don't worry, your Polar Bear will still be strong. When assigning ability score points, all Druids will likely want to boost their Wisdom to 16 to get that sweet +3 modifier. Next, you'll want to get both your Constitution and Dexterity scores to at least 14. If possible, make one of them 16 as well. Constitution will give your Druid more HP when not in Wildshape form, and also help you hold concentration on spells that require concentration. And Dexterity will help with initiative rolls, Dexterity saving throws, but also increase your Druid's armor class up to a max of +2 if you have a 14 or higher in Dexterity. You will likely dump Strength, and then it's really up to you where you want to disperse your leftover points. Intelligence helps with intelligence saving throws, which can be important, and of course it helps with intelligence-based skills, and Charisma will mostly benefit you in dialogue. As far as skills go, you may want to choose skills that are Wisdom and Dexterity based, considering that you've likely invested most of your ability score points into those abilities. This will make you exceptionally good at those particular skills. When in Wildshape form, you can speak to other animals, so you don't really need to take the Animal Handling skill, nor do you really ever have to prepare the Speak with Animals spell. Druids at level 1 get to choose 2 cantrips from a list of 6. Cantrips are spells that can be cast at will. They do not use up one of your limited spell slots. The easiest choice you'll ever make in a game is here, and it's Thorn Whip. It deals minor damage but also pulls enemies closer to you. With your maneuverability options with Wildshape, you can get to many places on the battlefield to position yourself to pull an enemy to their death, or at least dish out some nice extra damage on them from their fall. Many times it may actually be worth coming out of Wildshape to do this. Here's an example of me taking advantage of both Wildshape and Thorn Whip. Get the hell away from me. Your second cantrip choice is more so up to you. After you choose your 2 cantrips, if you gave yourself a 16 in Wisdom, you now get to prepare 4 spells from a list of 13. The spells that you have prepared are not permanent choices, so don't stress out here. You can swap these spells in and out when not in combat. When you get the ability to Wildshape at level 2, you cannot cast spells while in Wildshape form. But what you can do is cast a spell before Wildshape that requires concentration, and when you Wildshape, that spell will remain active for as long as you can hold that concentration. Holding concentration is done by succeeding on Constitution saving throws when you take damage. The 3 level 1 spells that use concentration include Fairy Fire, Entangle, and Fog Cloud. I would say Fairy Fire is a great choice to get familiar with here. Cast it before you go into Wild Shape, turn into an animal, and then attack the affected enemies. The enemies that are affected by Fairy Fire, you and your party will have advantage on your attack rolls against them, making your hits much more likely to land. Many spells you just won't use as a Moon Druid, but concentration spells can be your best friend. When you reach level 2, the real fun begins. This is where you'll choose your Druid subclass, and we're of course going with the Circle of the Moon. Both subclasses will learn Wild Shape at this level, but the Circle of the Moon gives it some really good added benefits. Wild Shape lets your Druid assume the form of a beast, taking on that beast statistics, excluding Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma. As a Moon Druid, to Wild Shape it will cost just a bonus action as opposed to an action when playing as a Land Druid. This allows you to Wild Shape and also attack all in one turn. One of the most powerful features of Wild Shape is that when a beast's form is taken down to 0 hit points, your Druid does not die or get knocked unconscious. Instead, they'll revert back to their humanoid form with whatever HP they had before Wild Shaping. It gets even better when you realize that you can then Wild Shape back into the same form or a different one, and once again gain the full HP of that particular beast. There is a limit on the amount of times that you can Wild Shape though, and that limit is twice per short or long rest. But here's a little life hack. With the way the short rest system is currently implemented in early access, you could actually have 3 Wild Shape forms in one combat encounter. Before combat, simply Wild Shape, then hit the short rest button, which replenishes your Wild Shape uses back to 2, and then enter combat. As a polar bear, you have 30 hit points, so turn into a polar bear, hit the short rest button, enter combat, and when that polar bear form drops to 0 hit points, you're reverted back into humanoid form. Wild Shape back into a polar bear form, getting 30 hit points once again. When that form drops to 0, you still have 1 Wild Shape charge left. So go ahead and transform back into polar bear form for the 3rd time with that 30 hit points. And there you go. So you could get 90 hit points from the polar bear form alone. And don't forget that your humanoid form also has hit points as well. If your Druid's normal form is taken to 0, then you'll be knocked down and out of the fight. As a Moon Druid, you'll get the ability to heal yourself in Wild Shape form through a feature called Lunar Mend. Lunar Mend heals you for 1 to 8 hit points and costs a bonus action and a spell slot. When you learn level 2 spells at Druid level 3, Lunar Mend can then be upcasted using a level 2 spell slot, making the heal more powerful. This is a great feature for the Moon Druid, and because it costs a bonus action and not an action, you can heal and attack, as long as you have spell slots to use. It's also important to note that dismissing your Wild Shape form in Baldur's Gate 3 costs nothing. So you can be in one form, dismiss it, go into another form using your bonus action, and then attack using your action, all in one turn. Now let's talk about the actual Wild Shape forms. At level 2, you'll get access to the Badger, the Cat, the Direwolf, Spider, and the Polar Bear. And when you reach level 4, you'll get to add the Deep Roth and the Dire Raven to that list. And I'll also mention that when you get your Illithid powers, you'll get a really cool form of the Intellect Devourer, but I don't want to really spoil that for you guys. There will be more Wild Shape choices available when the game actually comes out. The Badger is one of my personal favorites, and I highly recommend using it when you speak to other animals, because the close-up of the Badger is oh so cute. The Badger only has 13 hit points, so it will go down fast in combat, and it has 2 offensive attacks. The Badger's main use is for its burrow ability, which has a 40-foot range. This can be used in and out of combat. If you use it in combat, when your Badger comes up from its burrow, it has a chance to knock nearby enemies prone. If one of your party members or you yourself attacks a prone creature with a melee attack, they will have advantage on that attack. So combo your Badger with someone like Lae'zel and her AoE cleave attack to dish out great damage. Also look for enemies near ledges, because the Badger is the only Wild Shape form that has a claw attack that deals damage and can actually knock enemies back. We all know how powerful knocking things back can be in this game. The Badger's burrow ability is probably more useful out of combat though, as you can burrow underneath doors to get to the other side, or burrow into the ground to pop up on much higher terrain. This allows for a lot of creativity in solving problems, and don't be afraid to try its burrow even when in places that you don't think it would work. As a spider, you'll have 20 hit points, get a venomous bite that deals 1d8 plus 3 damage and can poison enemies, and also get web, which restrains enemies and can be used as a bonus action, so you could attack with its poison bite and use web all in the same turn. This definitely makes the spider more appealing if you want to do some damage, possibly inflict poison on an enemy, giving them disadvantage on their attack rolls, and also web down some melee based enemies to stop their movement, and maybe even then have Gale drop a firebolt. The spider can also be really useful in combat when you need to get your druid to elevated or lower areas, because it has the ability to jump pretty high, and also not take fall damage if you're jumping down. The direwolf still looks a little like a seal and a hyena, but it's getting there. It has 18 hit points, so it is a bit low, but it does deal out the most base damage that the current Wildshape forms can do. The wolf's bite attack deals 2d6 plus 3, while most other Wildshape forms are around 2d4 plus 3. The wolf also has a really cool attack called Exposing Bite. This attack only deals 1d4 plus 3, but it also distracts a target, making the next attack against that creature be a critical hit. That can certainly be powerful if you combo it with other melee-based party members. The exposed effect will last 2 rounds, so you could even attack on the next round with your wolf with its regular bite, and that bite will turn into 4d6 plus 3 damage as a critical hit. The direwolf also gets an ability called Inciting Howl, which is an AoE buff to movement speed for all party members within 30 feet. It only lasts for 1 turn and does cost an action, so make sure that it's something that your party actually needs for that round specifically. The cat form only has 2 hit points and deals extremely low damage. The cat's use is more so for stealth movement and utility situations. It has a meow ability that distracts creatures in a 60-foot radius, which is similar to the familiar cat, just more powerful. This can certainly be useful when you need to turn the gaze of other creatures away from one area, so your party members can sneak behind, take things, pickpocket, or even set up nicely for combat. Now on to perhaps the most popular pick, the polar bear, which is a Wildshape form exclusive to the Moon Druid. The polar bear is such a great choice simply because it has the highest hit points of 30. Like I said before, you can start the fight as a polar bear, and as long as you don't get killed in humanoid form, you could potentially have 3 polar bear forms in one fight, which is 90 hit points just from Wildshape. It is extremely tanky. On the topic of tankiness, the polar bear has an ability called Goading Roar, which sends out a taunt to enemies within 30 feet. Enemies that fail a wisdom save will then attack you and only you until they can succeed on a wisdom save. You are the ultimate tank, so you might as well pull as much damage onto you to keep your weakling party members safe so they can dish out damage. The polar bear's base attack, which is called Claws, deals 2d4 plus 4 damage, which is not as high as the wolf, but the HP makes up for the smaller but not bad damage amount. The next 2 animals you'll have access to when you reach Druid level 4, and we'll start off with the Dire Raven. It only has 13 hit points, so you're not going to be using it long in combat, but the great thing about the Raven is its maneuverability. While the spider can jump 37 feet vertically, the Raven can fly 60 feet. This is huge, and considering that you can dismiss a shape for free and use Wildshape as a bonus action, as long as you have a Wildshape charge available, you can get to most places on the battlefield if you need to. This can lead to great Thorn Whip pulls, or just a better positioning in general. The Raven does have an attack that can blind enemies, but you probably won't use it that often, and its regular beak attack deals 2d4 plus 2. Use the Raven to get to all sorts of places in and out of combat. And the last Wildshape option is the Ladder Climbing Deep Wrath. The Deep Wrath comes in at 2nd place for hit points with 23, and its base gore attack deals 3d4 plus 4 damage, so it's fairly tanky and it deals more potential damage than most other forms. It also has a charge attack where it charges forward up to 30 feet, dealing minor damage but potentially knocking enemies in its path prone. If multiple enemies line up and you have a melee-based party member ready to take advantage of prone targets, this can work very well. It's also important to mention that the Deep Wrath gets the Dancing Lights cantrip, so when you're in darker areas, depending on your party's setup, this might be the right choice. Like I said earlier in the video, you will get access to the Intellect Devourer form, but it's kind of tied into the story, so I'm going to let you guys discover that on your own. And those are the Wildshape forms that we'll have access to in early access. Now let's go over the remaining class features you'll gain as you level up. At Druid level 3, you'll get access to level 2 Druid spells, adding 12 more spells to your Druid spell list. Some of these spells are really good and also a lot of fun. I will go over all of these spells in depth on my Land Druid's guide, but for now I'll just mention the ones that work well with the Moon Druid. This brings us back to spells that require concentration, that you can cast and they will remain active when you Wildshape. Barkskin is a level 2 spell that will give you or another party member a 16 armor class number. Some party members will already have 16 or higher, so there's no need for Barkskin on them. The great thing about Barkskin is that you can cast it on yourself before Wildshape, then use Wildshape and it will remain active for as long as you can hold the concentration. For example, the bear has an armor class of 12. Cast Barkskin, transform back into a polar bear, and now the polar bear has 16. Just when you thought it couldn't get any tankier, it just did. Other concentration spells that can work well include Moonbeam, which calls down a beam of light that deals 2d10 radiant damage. You'd be surprised at how many enemies stay within it or walk into it. You can also move the beam if you want at the cost of your action. This can be a really powerful spell to go alongside Wildshape. Just make sure not to enter the light yourself. Enhance Ability can also be a useful one. For combat purposes, using Bear's Endurance can be a great Enhance Ability choice to help out other casters, because it will give them an advantage on their Constitution checks and also give them some temporary HP. Cast it on Shadowheart to help her hold her concentration on spells such as Bless, which can be a huge help to the party, and then go into Wildshape and attack. The other 3 concentration spells are Flaming Sphere, which summons a big fireball that rolls around. Spike Growth, which can be great to pop off in an area with a lot of enemies. It will slow enemies and also deal damage to them. Heat Metal is probably better with the Land Druid so that you can actually reapply it with a bonus action. Keep in mind that each Wildshape form will have its own Constitution score, so some will be better at holding concentration than others. The Polar Bear comes in first place here because it has a 16 in Constitution with a +3 modifier. And lastly is level 4, where you'll likely just take the ability score improvement, giving your Druid an 18 in Wisdom with a +4 modifier. You also get to pick up another cantrip, but it really doesn't matter what you choose here. The Moon Druid is an extremely powerful class in utility situations and combat alike. You really won't find another like it. And that will be it for the Circle of the Moon Druid. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know I take a little bit of time to put out these class guides, but I want to make sure that I spend the proper time with each of these classes before releasing a guide. If you guys ended up enjoying this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's a huge help to my channel. I do all sorts of content ranging from live streams to game reviews to game tutorials to lore videos and of course class guides. I'd love to have some of you guys back for a future video. Until next time.